A bipartisan watchdog group has released a report detailing how the federal government could pay for a Medicare for All system. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, some of the financing options include a 32% payroll tax, a mandatory public premium, and, quote, impossibly high taxes on high earners, corporations, and the financial sector.
So, why is this important? Middle-class taxes took center stage during the Democratic debate when Democratic presidential candidates were asked how they would fund the single-payer system. Senator Bernie Sanders has openly stated taxes will go up, while Senator Elizabeth Warren could only say that she would not sign a bill that doesn't cut costs. So joining us now to dig into this and so much more is host of the David Pakman Show, David Pakman himself. He joins us now via Skype. How are you, David?
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, David, we've been talking a lot here about this Medicare for All system, the proposals being put forward by both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I know you dig into some of these wonky things yourself. So, Senator Sanders, in a recent interview, he said that he doesn't feel like he's currently at a time where he needs to release a plan to pay for Medicare for All. It sounds awfully similar to what Elizabeth Warren is saying. I mean, as somebody, I think, like yourself, who would support this type of system, is that the correct way to go about this? And what are some of the options that they should be looking at?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that we on the left should understand, that I've been encouraging my audience to take this approach, is that we can identify a system that is way better than what we have now, while still conceding that no system is perfect and everything has opportunity costs, risk, reward, et cetera. And there are a lot of really bad criticisms of Medicare for All. Like, for example, you hear people say, the countries that have systems like it have a smaller population. The US has more people, so we can't do it. That's a terrible argument. In fact, you could make the opposite argument, which is when you spread the risk over way more people, it's actually much easier to predict what your spending is going to be per person. So, like, that's a bad argument against Medicare for All. It's okay to recognize that there are questions about this issue you're bringing up about paying for it. And there are solid left-wing analyses that have been done, which point out that, for example, some of the ways in which proposals will pay for this plan assume that we will reduce our healthcare spending to the level of Australia or Canada on a per-person basis, but don't explain how we're going to do that. That's like a real question, right, that we need to think about. If the way this is being paid for is assuming we have our costs, how are we having our costs? Because to assume that we're going to be able to do that is not something that you can do unless you defend it. So I think there are real questions about this. It could still be the best plan. And I think that the left needs to be comfortable with that idea and looking into these details like we're trying to do.
Yeah, well, I think that's entirely fair, because you do have to address. I mean, our healthcare system is so screwed at every level that it's going to take more than just Medicare for All. You also have to deal with that fraud, the insanity of the pricing schemes, from the doctors to the hospitals to the pharmaceutical companies, et cetera. And it would be good to have some more specifics there. But I think, David, also a lot of times on the left, it's very frustrating that it's only when you want to do something for people that suddenly it's like, well, how are you going to pay for it? No one said, how are you going to pay for it when we just gave away the store to rich people and big corporations? No one says, how are you going to pay for it when there's another endless war that we're fighting overseas? No one ever asks those questions. It's only essentially when you're going to deliver some benefit that will actually help working class people that suddenly it's like, well, you got to have it all laid down. We got to know exactly where the money's going to come from. And you've got to have, your options and your I's dotted and your T's crossed before we can even talk about that.
Well, there's two good points there. One is, yes, why does any change need to be perfect? We don't have a perfect system now. If we can improve the system we have, even if it's not perfect, that's still something we should consider. But sometimes the same talking points that are used against proposed changes could be applied now. I mean, another bad talking point against Medicare for All is care will be rationed. Most people who say that don't even really understand what that means, but care is effectively rationed now. When people now are opting not to get preventive care or are choosing to wait rather than be seen because of a high copay or coinsurance or whatever the case is, there's a rationing that's happening now where for-profit companies get to decide when is it okay for you to go see the doctor if you can't afford it out of pocket, because they decide who's going to pay for it. So rationing is already taking place, and it's really disappointing to see the same talking points that could be used about our current system applied to a system that in many ways would be better.
So what do you make currently of these debates? There's been a lot of criticism, I think, from a lot of the Bernie Sanders crowd of Elizabeth Warren not having a plan in order to pay for Medicare for All. Now, I think it is interesting because this is a person who literally has a plan for everything, and it doesn't seem to be the priority for her within this race. Do you think that's a detriment for her prospects going forward?
I think anytime a candidate is asked, how will you do X? And they say, anything from, I will figure that out when I'm elected during the Republican primary back in 2016 to whatever version of that, it's not good. The optics of that aren't good. Now, that being said, as you pointed out, a lot of the plans that claim to say how they will pay for Medicare for all have some holes in them that even respectable left-wing economists have pointed out. So yes, I think that the optics of it are absolutely a detriment. The truth is that there are real questions about the people's plans that say they will tell you exactly how to pay for Medicare for all. There are questions about those as well. So on the substance, I think it's less of an issue. On the optics, it's a disaster.
Yeah, I agree.
What did you make of Andrew Yang released his first early state ad, and he talked about having a son who's on the autism spectrum, but he also talked about his support of Medicare for All, which I thought was really interesting, especially given the fact that Medicare for All is very much under attack right now by the Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg's of the world, and also because Yang has himself in recent days sort of distanced himself from the specifics of Bernie's version of Medicare for All. So wondering what you make of that.
So the cynical interpretation would be that the benefit of attaching his name to something generally speaking called Medicare for All, while at the same time criticizing or distancing himself from the specifics of some of the plans and configurations that have been put out there. That would be like the cynical interpretation. Another cynical interpretation would be, the ad is being released in front of an audience where he does want to attach his name to Medicare for All, whereas in other places or in other formats or in front of other audiences, he might say something different. I think that what basically is going on is that there is a bit of a watering down of Medicare for All. Medicare for All as a concept is not the same as a particular Medicare for All bill, and there are lots of candidates who are generally speaking saying, I'm for Medicare for All and or whatever gets everybody care the quickest and at the least, at the lowest price, and then sort of sort out the details later on the debate stage. And they benefit from having 12 people on the debate stage and not being able to get past one or two talking points. A lot of candidates who don't really have a plan or understanding of what the particulars look like never have to defend it because you've got 12 people on the stage.
Yeah, interesting. Well
Very
said.
interesting.
David, thank you so much. So great
Thanks,
to see
David.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Next up on Rising, Mayor Pete's past work experience is taking center stage, but maybe not in a way he would like.
And it appears most millennials would be okay voting for a socialist candidate. Team Rising is going to weigh in next.